We welcome everybody from wherever you're coming from. In my place, it's 5 p.m., and so we'll get started because of that. My name is Dr. Lee Osler, and I live in the West Coast of the United States in the state of Washington. This is the Redox 5. This was on Thursday night, and there are still some I know that are a little discombobulated because we've been on Friday night for years, and we've moved now to Thursday nights, joining Alan Noble's sequence. So we're taking some of his Thursdays. But we welcome you nonetheless. I'm joined with Jim and Ann Glenn in San Antonio, Texas, who are the illustrious anchors of this for sure and keep this thing going. We're also joined tonight by Dr. Dick Walker in Spokane, Washington. And he is a very accomplished ER physician. He's now in retirement from that, so I guess we could call him he's a recovering physician. But he also has some advanced expertise in nutrition and wellness and so forth. Consummate athlete. For those of you who don't know, he's been up on Everest and has climbed a lot of mountains around the world that we can only look at in pictures, at least the rest of us. And so he's seen a different view of the world than we have for sure. Tonight, we do have with us Dr. Aaron Kaufman from Santa Fe, New Mexico, or thereby, close by.
Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Actually Cedar Crest, but who counts?
Yes, it's close.
Yeah.
And so, but he is a wonderful wellness physician. That's kind of his focus, is that we want to get him well, not just intervene and beat down symptoms. And so we respect his mindset there. Before we turn some time over to him, and when we do, Aaron, I would love to have you just give us a brief kind of bio sketch or whatever, give us your background, and then you can segue into kind of what brought you into ASEA and why it's significant for you. But first, before we start, I'd like to kick it over to Dick. If you could give a quick disclaimer so that we set ourselves off on the right direction here, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. ASEA Redox does not cure, heal, or treat any medical condition. What it does is provide your body with the tool that it can use to activate, turn on repair pathways in the body so that your body can better do the job of repairing and preventing many problems, which it's fully capable of doing if the cell signaling, cellular communication is on track.
Yeah, so Aaron, you've always impressed me as someone, and we should mention here that Dr. Maureen Hayes is not with us tonight. She's enjoying the holiday with her family. But you've impressed me, Aaron, as someone who really understands how the body works. So would you go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe segue into that conversation, your take on how redox signaling works and kind of your take on all that.
Okay. And you said you want my history, my practice, and all that.
Yeah, just
how I was introduced.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been in family integrative medical practice in Albuquerque for, and in a month or two, it'll be 40 years. And, my practice has been integrative, or as Dr. Osler said, wellness oriented ever since the get-go, before there was such a term as integrative medicine. So I've always incorporated into mainstream practice whatever works and whatever helps the patient that has low risk to benefit profile, is relatively not toxic to the body and so forth, but enhances its ability, just what you were talking about, to heal itself, Dr. Walker. So again, I do lots of prescriptions, a lot of injections, though. I do regenerative injections like PRP and proliferative therapies. I used to do a lot of osteopathic manipulation to help the body move so that it could heal itself. I've trashed my shoulders, so I kind of passed that on to the chiropractors in the clinic. But I do more human identical hormones than anybody in New Mexico for probably ballpark of 30 years. I have a dispensary with, historically hundreds of enzymes and homeopathics and glandulars and supplements and vitamins and so forth. that I use, and everybody gets recommendations for how to eat properly because planet Earth 2025 in the Western world, food is toxic. And I think, it's arguable, but not really very arguable, but from my point of view, and I assume you guys as well, that a lot of the diseases that are just epidemic on the planet are due to food. And, the agencies that regulate food are the same ones that regulate drugs, and they're just unrepentant and greed oriented. And I won't go too far out on that limb right now, but in things that are toxic for the body that cause all the diseases of affluence like cancer and diabetes and heart attacks and so forth. And what's foundational to that is chronic inflammation. And so these things and sedentary lifestyle cause these diseases of affluence. Anyway, so a big part of what I do, and uh, I think we're on the same page, is teach people how to eat properly, to cut out sugar and starch, to eat whole food that's not packaged and full of GMOs and things that you can't pronounce. You shouldn't be eating those. And to get out of their chairs and move, to do something to get their heart rate up. So that's sort of for 40 years I've been evolving that, and there's huge amounts of stuff going on, and that was how I came to be introduced to redox signaling, to ASEA and these products. Dr. Friend talked to me 14 years ago and told me about this. And, I'll be unrepentant about this also. I was network marketing averse. I'd been, burned out in the 80s and 90s, long time ago, by, other network marketing companies that were just, there was hype and misrepresentation. But I involved myself, and it's like, enough of this. So I stopped. For 15 years, your chicken bone in the neck, Lee, Dr. Osler, I didn't want to hear about it. People would say, and this doctor friend introduces me to redox signaling. I go, is it network marketing? She goes, yes. And I go, absolutely not. And I was serious. I just had enough of that, and I didn't want to hype people. It's not who I am. I wanted to be sincere and, really focus on what was helping people. And she was smart. I said no. And she knew I was a runner. I was a fairly high performance athlete back then. I live at 7,000 feet, and, 1,500 feet above Albuquerque in the Sandia Mountains. And, I would run out my back door up through the Cibola National Forest up to 8,000 feet, 2, 3, 4 times a week. And I'd run for almost an hour, up to 8,000 and back with steep Rocky Mountain trails, which is pretty stupid retrospectively, but we won't dwell on that now. And I'd been doing that 16 years. She starts giving me independent research articles. ASEA still does huge amounts of research. It's just wonderful. And back then, it was really good research, double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized, all these things that we as physicians look at, as scientists look at. But they were independent. They weren't in, medical journals and so forth, but really good research. And it showed, for real important reasons, athletes, going, 12% further before they ran out of oxygen, mice going, 29% further before they were exhausted, all these huge metabolic shifts in 15 minutes in these athletes, 15 minutes after they would drink the ASEA, before they even, performed athletically, in this huge number of what they called metabolites, the precursors and the intermediaries to the energy production cycle inside our energy factories in every cell, the mitochondria. And so what it told me as I'm looking at this research is this is dramatically enhancing our ability to utilize energy and create and utilize energy. And finally, after 2 years of research, and hopefully people on this call are not as thick-headed as I was, because I look back, if I'd started 2 years early, I could have been using it for 2 years while I was doing investigation. So hopefully you go ahead and have your experience and then do your investigation. So you have, these positive experiences. But it was so compelling because it was what I was doing running up the mountain. So after 2 years, of going to PubMed.gov, which is the US government's website for all the peer-reviewed medical research, because when Dr. Walker and I assume you, Dr. Osler, were in medical school and dental school, and we were studying energy production inside the mitochondria, there was no such term as redox signaling, and we did not understand what those molecules were that spun off as a byproduct of making energy that were negatively and positively charged, reductants and oxidants, and hence the name redox. And we just thought they were waste products. So it wasn't until 1998 that these three Italian PhD researchers won the Nobel Prize for demonstrating that not only were these not waste products like we thought, they were actually foundational to life. They turned on and turned off every single process in every living cell, plants, animals, humans. And so, people listening to us, you wouldn't hear me, you wouldn't think a thought, digest food, grow hair, take a breath. Your heart wouldn't beat that's not signaled, turned on and turned off by these molecules. So they are literally foundational to life. We didn't understand that. And so when I was introduced, I had to go to PubMed and read abstracts that, this relatively new science started in 1998. And this is 2011, 13 years later. I start reading these articles to understand it. Then I look at this independent research, and I finally got to the place where it's like, okay, give it a try. Had amazing experiences running up the mountain within 3 months. And I wasn't drinking it properly. I was using small amounts relative to today. I had started powering up the mountain harder and faster because I could carry more oxygen. It's enhancing energy, production and utilization. Within 3 months, I set new personal best times for these trails. At that time, I've been running 16 years by 20% compared to 16 years ago. That got my attention within, and that was a month before I turned 60. So that definitely got my attention, and I kept setting new personal best times. Within about 4 months, my shoulders stopped hurting. Within 7 months, my hips stopped hurting. And a year in, and Jim will appreciate this, my low back stopped hurting. So a number of things. I started thinking more clearly and so forth. All this stuff started happening. So that was what compelled me to start using it. And then I started sharing it with patients and seeing just dramatic stuff. But a little take home on this is number one, don't waste your time, do the research, but while you're having your experience. But number two, realize people go, oh, I'll use it. I'll try one bottle or I'll try it for a month. You need minimum of 3 to 4 months to make sure you experience something. Now, it doesn't mean some people don't take their first taste and boom, they sleep better or whatever. But, it's a progressive thing. All of us have been drinking it a long time, and anybody who's been drinking it for a long time will tell you. I would say, and you guys can weigh in on this, it was probably about 5 years. I kept noticing improvements, I'm 12 years in, and sometimes I'll notice an improvement, but mostly it's maintaining. And as I'm aging and things are still breaking down, I just drink more and use more of the products, and it makes a huge difference. But that was sort of my background. And, what a gift. It continues to keep on giving. And I just love sharing it with people. And the story, I tell people when I'm doing my presentations, it's like I pray for them that they have the experience I have of hearing story after story after story of people having their lives transformed in, so many different ways. I would say everybody experiences more energy. They think more clearly. Everybody sleeps better and they hurt less. But the other, people who are not dead, who should have been dead, the stories are just manifold.
Hey, Aaron, real quick, how much do you recommend what you started off doing then with what you've learned and know? What would you tell someone brand new how much they should start with? And I know it's age based, maybe history based. What are you dealing with currently? Are you an extreme athlete? What are kind of your guidelines? And then Dick, maybe the same thing from you.
Jim, the gross generalization that I used to tell people is anybody over 50,
Um,
anybody with significant health conditions. Oh, I've got this
there
thing in
go
my
your
Zoom
balloons
that when I
again.
do that, it sends
Not your
balloons
birthday.
up.
You
My
had that the
birthday's
last
Monday,
time
so it's an
too.
early celebration. But anybody over 50, anybody with, I won't do this again, with significant health conditions, or anybody who's any kind of athlete, and that may mean somebody with a heart condition who just walking to the mailbox, but they should be drinking, I still say 8 ounces a day. Now, a lot of people are not going to do that, and we have these amazing new essentials bundles for the past year that are equivalent to 6 ounces a day. That's a pretty good dose unless somebody's really got significant issues. And yeah, they need to, like you were saying, maybe even more than that. But, there's a lot of qualifiers, but, an essentials bundle or 8 ounces a day if they have a lot of issues is sort of the foundation.
Dick, what about you?
I would agree with that. I've never taken less than 8 ounces, even though in the beginning, as Aaron would attest, most people were just saying 4 ounces. That's what it suggested on the bottle.
Yep.
But I'm the kind of guy that I figured if 4 ounces was good for everybody else, 8 ounces was probably better for me. But I was looking for kind of what Aaron was looking for or achieved. I was looking for better performance. I was 64 going on 65. I'd climbed mountains all over the world. I still wanted to do some of those crazy kind of things, but my body was starting to rebel. It was starting to say, you're getting too old to do that kind of stuff. And it was mostly that I couldn't recover. It just took me forever to recover from a really strenuous effort, like going over and climbing Mount Rainier in 48 hours. And so that's what I noticed first, because when I was getting ready to go do something in the mountains, I would accelerate my workout schedule, and sometimes go for runs twice a day, or weight training and a run. And I gotten so I couldn't do that. But within a couple of weeks of starting ASEA, I was going out and jogging, for an hour, hour and a half twice a day when I had the time. And I hadn't been able to do that for a while. So that really got my attention. But my dosage recommendation for anybody that is elderly, and that could be 40, it could be 60, depending on the individual. I would say start with 4 ounces for the first week, bump it up to 8 ounces the second week, go on up to 12 the third week. And if you're really in bad shape or really want to notice something quickly, even go all the way up to 16 ounces, and stay at that higher dose for anywhere from 6 weeks, 3 months, up to 3 months or so, and you're going to have a quick response. But if people can't afford to do that, they can do it more slowly. They can just take a lesser and give the molecules a chance to work in the body's benefit. But if you really want a quick response, one way to achieve that is to take more molecules. But 4 ounces is not quite enough unless you're, in your 20s and you're just looking for a little boost or something. But the older you are and the sicker you are, the more of these molecules you need to get the body's inflammation under control, get the oxidative stress level down, and really give the body an ability to fix and repair itself, which is quite capable of doing, but the signaling has to be there.
Well, it seems logically that I was 58 when I started, that I'm at a deficit. Can you just kind of go over that, why it would make sense to maybe start like Dick said, and Dr. Kaufman said, start ramping it up over several, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. But it makes sense to do that to build your body back up because you're at an extreme. So when does this deficit start, Lee? When do we start losing the ability to make these molecules?
Yeah, it started a long time ago. When we reach puberty, plus or minus, we start having less capacity in our ability to process redox signaling pathways. And as that continues to decline, the conventional wisdom, we call it 1% per year, so that's 10% a decade. As that declines and diminishes, we have less capacity to activate our survival and longevity genes, the things that keep us well and resist, insults or disease or whatever, because our inner doctor, our reparative mechanisms are less capable as we age. And so, directly to your question of starting small and maybe incrementally increasing, one of the things that happens when our cells begin working is that they begin working. And that means they're detoxing. They're getting rid of stuff that we previously weren't able to dispose of adequately. That has a whole lot to do with glutathione. Glutathione is one of the phase 2 detoxification factors in the liver. We have phase 1 and phase 2 that are noted in the liver. And the phase 2 part is where glutathione comes in, and it takes the molecules that are toxic and that have just been detoxified or biotransformed, meaning they're made water soluble, so they're now polar. We can now attach to them and we can eliminate them in the body. And so as this starts to mobilize, as cells begin to work better, some people can feel a challenge with that. And so they may not feel well. It's kind of a counterintuitive thought process here that if I thought this was supposed to help me feel better, and it's like, well, it's working, and so some of us may hit the wall. This was my wife's experience, and it took 6 to 8 weeks for her to kind of begin to work through. Back then, we didn't understand this nuance, and I thought, well, maybe she just needs more. So we just kept throwing more at her, and she kept detoxing more, and it made it worse, right away. And that's maybe Dick or Aaron have a different concept there, but probably 10-15% of the people might notice that. It didn't bother me. I'm relatively healthy to start with, but that's a reason. That's one of the reasons why we might want to acclimate, ourselves into a dosage that begins to work well, but to meet the challenges.
Yeah,
And Dr.
I wouldn't disagree with that. If somebody does really complain of a lot of malaise and fatigue as they ramp it up quickly like that, I just have them back off, because it very well could be that their bodies have a heavier load of waste products that they need to get out of the cell, and when they're doing that, it's not comfortable. And the other thing that's important is that they drink enough water to flush that out of their system, because the liver does part of that. The liver does the methylation and then attaches the glutathione, so it's water soluble. But then it's got to head over to the kidneys to get out of the body. By and large, that's where most of that stuff happens. So you've got to be sure that you've got enough hydration going on, and a lot of people are not sufficiently hydrated, and you shouldn't really count the volume of ASEA in your hydration. That's ASEA, that's cell signaling. Yes, there is fluid there, but you need to get enough water. Basically, what people say, what's the best detoxing fluid to take? Well, it's good water. Clean water is the best thing to use. And you need to drink enough of that. But and probably more people will have a little bit of that detoxing malaise and fatigue with that quick response. But a lot of people, the reason why I started recommending those higher doses in the beginning was that a lot of people would quit if they weren't perceiving that something was happening. And when we say something is working, that means something different to Lee and myself and Dr. Kaufman, because we're talking about what it's doing biochemically and physiologically. We know it's working from the first dose you take. It's working physiologically. Most people would say working means I feel better. And there's a lag time oftentimes between what we consider working physiologically, biochemically, that happens immediately. And noticing that there's a positive change in your body, there can be a lag time of weeks to months sometimes for that to happen. And you just have to trust that the product is working and stick with it. And you will get to the other side of that bump. And it's a little bit like physical therapy. If you've ever had surgery or an injury and you go to physical therapy, it doesn't feel good necessarily. They're not there to make you feel good. They're there to make you recover. And sometimes that recovery phase is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. So that's how I look at, people when they first start taking ASEA Redox.
Hey,
Hey,
Dr.
Aaron,
Kauf, go ahead.
I want Aaron to follow up there just really quick because I think Dick made a really good point there. This working idea.
Yeah.
The mindset that at least the three of us and Jim and Ann are in it on the consumer side or the patient side, our societal paradigm, about what wellness means. Could you maybe just kind of address it in your words about what it means when we're talking about that working and how it's not treatment? We're not, this isn't a drug, that's an intervention. Could you maybe just unpack that just a little bit?
Who are you wanting that from?
Aaron, please.
Aaron, great. Yep.
So it's a good point, and as I was listening to you guys, I was kind of thinking of those, so you gave me a segue. The FDA in the United States and the TGA in Australia and similar organizations around the world, the drug regulatory agencies in every country pretty much say this is not a drug. In the United States, it's considered a supplement, even though it has no nutritional value. The TGA in Australia says that it's a food, even though it has no nutritional value. If we make medical claims, just what Dr. Walker was talking about at the beginning, and we say this, in whatever, pick a disease, cancer, diabetes, heart attacks, or so forth, this does something. They say, that means it's a drug and we're off the market. So that's why we, talk in terms of conditions where and so forth. We're not being evasive, we're trying to be compliant. So real clearly, what these molecules do, and we've touched on it numerous times, is they turn on cellular health, efficiency. I like to say what you were talking about, Dr. Osler, starting at puberty, we're flush with these as children. And starting at puberty, about 1% less every year, 10% less per decade. Qualification is if you're healthy. Okay, so here we are in the Western world eating crap American food that causes us to make less. And the way to conceptualize that is a little kid, 5 or 10 years old. We've all seen this. They cut or burn themselves or sprain their ankle. 2 or 3 days, they're fine. I mean, it's just remarkable. Starting at puberty, about 1% less per year, if we're healthy. You think of a 30-year-old, cuts or burns themselves, sprains their ankle, same thing. It's probably going to take closer to 2 to 3 weeks to heal. Monday, I'll be 72. I'm in pretty good shape. I'm definitely getting old, but that same cut or burn or sprain is going to take me 2 to 3 months to heal. Very important concept. So these products, using these molecules is the first time we can turn back the clock. And people say, well, how does it work in this condition, that condition? And, the scientists who helped to stabilize these and figure out what they actually were said, well, does the condition you're describing involve a cell? This euthans our cells. So how would your body respond to any of these conditions? I won't name them, but if it were 20 years younger, if it were 40 years younger. And then the next thing to think about is it's not to say that children and teenagers and young people don't get all these diseases of affluence and all, but you think about us as we get older and all of these disease processes increase. Yeah, we're eating toxic food, but also we're making less of these. And so we have more and more of these diseases. So being able to replenish them, I just tell people this turns back the clock. These are the molecules of youth. So that's number one. And the only thing I would touch on what Dr. Walker was saying is, and he actually talked about it, you know, when people are hydrating because they're going through this adjustment period, they're toxic, they've been using chemotherapy or drugs and not, eating crap American food and sitting in their chair and watching TV and, standard America, then they're probably gonna detoxify. Their cells aren't doing their job. They're deficient in redox signaling molecules, so they don't go through these processes that Dr. Osler has taught us so eloquently about in his 4 or 5 books now. This cleanup process, the repair process, the being able to take care of abnormal cells, all of this, they don't do it. So you start replacing this, and I love the analogy of our cells become senescent. It means they're senile. And you think it's not a pretty picture, but you think about a little old person with dementia, cognitive decline, and they're kind of sitting there and they don't really know what's going on, and the trash is piling up, or oh my gosh, the house is on fire, and they're just kind of sitting there. They're senescent. The cells are the same way when they get toxic. When all this crap builds up, they stop responding to these triggers that Dr. Osler has taught us so eloquently about, that clean all that up and wake the cells up. Now we start replenishing molecules of youth, and all of a sudden they wake up. They start to become younger, and they go, holy mackerel, and they start taking out the garbage, the detox. So drinking plenty of fresh water. I tell patients half your body weight in ounces of water a day. If somebody weighs 200 pounds, 100 ounces of water is a little more than 3 liters or 3 quarts of good quality, not tap water. It's got chlorine and all kinds of crap in it. So at least carbon block filtered, or I love alkaline water or spring water per day. And that's going to really help them kick out all the trash. I don't even know, Lee, if I answered your question. I just got off on those tangents. But I
That's
talk
great.
about this with patients all day, every day.
Yeah, that's great. I was going to add, if that's okay. So I was thinking, when people are doing this and that in their habits or their regular lifestyle that may not be redox lifestyle, they sabotage the ability to allow these molecules to work their very best, because between GMOs and electromagnetic rays, and like you already mentioned, the typical Western diet, if it's not coming out of the ground and you can't even read the ingredients, why even consider consuming it? And that's where our Via line comes in, that I strongly recommend, because of how it's sourced and how it synergetically works with redox signaling, how it's 100% absorption. And you're not going to get that in many things that are out there. But, if people would be regular, taking their molecules, not skipping days, not mixing it, and then they add, I'm assuming y'all believe you were just holding the Renew 28. They add the Renew 28. They really marry together, so you can get the inside out and the outside in healing, utilizing the gel through the skin being the largest organ, and they can benefit from the molecules every day, even if they can't afford 6 ounces, 8 ounces. There's ways that you can get that stuff free, but if they could add the gel to their daily lifestyle, not skip days, do it every day. You can use Renew head to toe anywhere. And then maybe we can talk about how you add the gold, the newest redox signaling, to those very specific, Jim saw by the 3rd day with gold, 85% reduction in areas that really were aggravating more recent. And putting on gold by the 3rd day, he's not experiencing the things he had because of what gold did. So maybe we can add to what our routine should be. It should be to include the redox molecules maybe they would consider, if they don't know about the radiance, they should start considering our collagen support. And then, you know, if they could supplement with better nutrition, that would be great. So one of you guys, you can take it away.
I think those are things we should talk about. But before we leave this general discussion about redox signaling, there's two terms that I really think are important for people to understand. One is stress resilience, because our bodies are constantly being exposed to stress. And most people just think of emotional stress, but there's environmental stress, there's dietary stress, which on the crappy American diet, we are definitely exposed to that. There's the stress of exercise. So the body has to deal with these stresses. And redox signaling molecules, the native ones that our body makes, are very integral to being able to manage that stress, so that it doesn't make us sick. And supplementing with the SIA definitely increases our resilience, our ability to bounce back from these. And I think there are like 8 different specific stressors that the body has to deal with. And then the other term that we have Liaso to thank for is being anti-fragile. And I just love that concept, because I've talked to people for years about saying good health is much more than not being sick. It's not just the absence of symptoms, it's a step above that. But I never could really put one good word to describe that. But Lee's hit on it. Anti-fragile is really what you want to be. You want your body to be resilient and anti-fragile, and be able to tolerate the bad stuff that happens to us for whatever reason. Yeah, hold up that book, because if you haven't read that book or don't understand the concept of being anti-fragile, that should be everybody's goal. And it becomes increasingly important as we get older, because the elderly there are nursing homes and care facilities in this country are full of people who are fragile and don't understand the concept of guarding their health and becoming anti-fragile, so that they are less likely to end up being dependent on somebody else for keeping for their life, you know. So anti-fragile is a great thing to understand, and stress resilience, I think, is a very important result of supplementing with ASEA Redox.
Can you guys deal with, because a lot of people get on this and go, well, it didn't work on me. Can you just cover that these molecules have to work? They cannot not work. That while someone put a comment in there while I've been on and I don't feel it.
And that,
the two words, I don't feel it.
That gets back to what does work mean? Work for a lot of people means I feel it or I don't feel it. Work to me means that from the first dose of ASEA that you take, it is working physiologically, biochemically in your body to do the things that we're talking about here. But sometimes it takes a while before you notice that a symptom has improved, or something about your life and your health is improving. That's what most people, that's what they mean by working. So.
Well, and I've seen people, Dr. Walker and all of y'all, that they go, well, I don't see or feel anything, but yet other people that haven't seen them in a while go, okay, what are you doing?
Right.
You know, you look totally different. Okay, you're more spry. You're doing this or you're doing that. But I've also had people that I haven't had anybody do this, but it's like, well, if you stay on it for 3 months and you do it correctly, and you go, well, I don't feel it. I go, well, then stop taking it. Just stop. And if you did it correctly, 4 to 6 to 8 ounces a day, I will guarantee them that you will go, holy mackerel. Now I know. But it's just getting people over that hump that, well, okay, I'll give it 90 days. And after, 2 days, they go, it didn't work on me. Can you deal with that, Aaron?
And maybe they need to take more. Maybe at 4 ounces, you're not seeing it because you really might need 6. We don't really know what's going on with
you. Nancy had to get quite a bit more, and or Lee, with your wife as well. Aaron, have you seen that as well with people that maybe they had to take a little bit more?
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't had this happen in a long time, but over the years, talking to as many people as we do, I've had people say, "Oh, it's not working, and I'm going to stop." And I go, "Okay, great. I'm not here to, push the river." you know, and I say, do this. Let's say they're just using 4 ounces. I couldn't get them to use more. I say, okay, what have you got? Like 3 bottles left, let's say. I say,
Mhm.
double your dose. Let's say they're taking 4 ounces to 8 ounces until it runs out. And then exactly what you were talking about, Jim, then all of a sudden you pull the rug, they stop. And I think that's a decent chance of them going, oh, I didn't realize whatever. The foundational idea that all of us understand, and again, Leah's written about so eloquently, is that these are, going back to what we were talking about earlier, these are literally the molecules of youth. They are foundational to cellular function. You would not be here, much less hear me speak and think a thought and so forth and so on, your heartbeat, without these. So when they're flush, when we're young, when there's plenty of these, everything works great. When there's not enough, things break down. They stop doing their job, recognizing damage, repairing it, recognizing abnormal cells, causing, programmed cell death, apoptosis, so forth and so on. So that is the idea behind, okay, you're drinking this, you're using this on your skin, or to a different degree, but you're rubbing this on areas of discomfort, we'll say, things that hurt. They have to work. They are part of what you are producing right now, not as much of. So they have to work. And based on a lot of things, like those studies I named right from the get-go, the metabolic studies, 15 minutes later, they, sorry about that. I don't know how to turn that off, but it's kind of entertaining. Based on those studies, we
For
know.
us too, Aaron.
What's that?
It's entertaining for us as well.
It interrupts the flow of thought, but it's fun. But I've just kind of resigned myself to it because I don't know how to turn it off. But we know that they're working in those early metabolic studies in 15 minutes. But from later research and based on what we understand, what we don't often talk about is that these molecules, these redox signaling molecules, are 2 and 3 and 4 atoms in size. Tiny, tiny molecules. So they don't have to be like, a supplement or most things on the market. They do not have to be digested and metabolized to work. They are absorbed directly through the mucous membranes into the gut mucosae, through the skin when you use the gels on your skin. They're in right now. And they're across all the barriers, including the blood-brain barrier, because they're native. We are producing these, not enough. So we know to sort of deal with the issue, they are working right now, turning on these cascades, these processes in the body that are our normal functioning when we're young and healthy. So they can't not work. And just what everybody was talking about before, yeah, what we actually notice is totally individual. And that's why I said at the beginning, no matter, oh, I didn't notice anything, but at 4 months, I started sleeping better. 7 months, my hip stopped hurting. A year, my back stopped hurting. That's why I was talking about as we're turning on these regenerative, these healing, these youthening processes, then things change and we notice them. But they are happening from, I would say, not 15 minutes, from the instant it touches our body.
Right.
I like how Dick mentioned at the beginning, opening up the pathways
Yeah.
for then the body to do the repair. How much more simple can this get? We're born to be able to
Born to live.
to have that repair.
Yeah. Dick, would you or Lee, would you offer anything on top of that? On is it working or not? Dick?
It's always working. It's just a question of are you noticing it or not? And there's not a good way to measure that, but like Aaron said, there are metabolic studies that we've done that show that it's working metabolically. But most of us aren't going to run out and do those tests or get those studies done. But it works on everybody. But
And everything alive.
there's a great amount of variability between people and how soon they notice that some symptom or some aspect of their health is causing them to feel better or different. That varies substantially.
Mhm.
You know, what I would say, Dick, is, I'm emphatic. I even put it in my welcome letter to new people when I introduce them to this, that they fill in the results tracker. And the reason
Exactly.
is it helps them notice more subtle stuff. Oh, yeah, I guess if I tally these numbers up, I do have more energy. I'm sleeping better, whatever. It helps them notice subtle stuff. So the results tracker is a great way to notice more.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Lee?
I love that card.
This whole topic, this whole section right here is a witness or another validation of our concern for people thinking in the mindset of drugs. We take an aspirin and we expect the headache to go away. Well, what happens if it doesn't? Well, then it doesn't work. Well, in direct answer to your question, it's biologically. I won't say physiologically, I'll say biologically, it's impossible for it to not work. It's always working because these, by definition, are what the switches in the cell depend on to activate the gene pathways. Somebody asked about the gene pathways. These are the pathway genes that activate the DNA, that tell the DNA how to respond. Just a really quick metaphor for people to get their heads around this. If you looked in your room or somewhere in your house or your building and you looked on the wall and you saw a thermostat, you could say, what's the thermostat for? Well, the reason there's a thermostat in your home is because it surveils the conditions of your home, the ambient condition, environment, and it detects when there's a departure from that balance or that homeostasis. So when the air gets cold or the air gets hot in your home, this surveillance mechanism detects that, it senses that, and it activates a machine, a process, to either heat the air or to chill the air as needed to bring it back to that balanced set point that was predetermined. That's in the programming. Whereupon, when it reaches that, it turns it off. So the switch in the thermostat is turning on, it's activating, and it's turning off, meaning there's gene silencing occurring so that I don't have a reaction when I don't need it. And so this process of responsiveness to the existing environmental conditions in the cell is really what we're talking about. And this is a slight departure, if not a significant departure, from decades of thinking about if I just megadose, if I just take a lot of vitamins, a lot of antioxidants, I can fix all these diseases. And the point is, yeah, if I have an acute issue, I might need more quantity of those things to combat, for example, an oxidative storm or, in my body. But I need that little bit of stress. It's a minor amount of stress in my body to condition it, to make it resilient, to make it responsive to the conditions that are going on. And if I suppress that with an abundance of antioxidants, then I am not able to activate the gene pathways that my body depends on. All I'm doing is I'm just covering all the sins of oxidation with an exogenous compound that I've swallowed or eaten. And so this all speaks to the biochemistry of redox switches, redox sensitive switches that are sensitive to the ambient condition inside the body, the cell, whereupon it knows how to sense or detect when there is either a slight amount or a high amount, either one, and respond accordingly. If it's a high amount, it creates inflammation. If it's a mild amount, it will activate my survival and longevity genes. And to Dick's point earlier and to Aaron's, the whole point here is we're trying to condition the cell to be responsive. Think of a fire department. The firemen are sitting in there in the fire station, and they're always at the ready. They never know when the next insult or the next person who's going to cough in their face will come along and cause a problem. And the picture on that book that Ann held up, the tree there, that's the icon for me that says you need roots. And the bigger, deeper the roots are, the better the tree can survive the storm, right? But if I make it easy for the tree and I don't stress it periodically, if I don't exercise, if I don't fast, if I don't eat the right nutrients, if I don't keto eat once in a while, if I don't do those things and do them randomly sometimes, if I don't do that, I'm not going to grow deep roots that will stabilize me in the face of a storm. And so this resilience thing is this redox lifestyle. These are all grounded on true principles of how the cell works. Therefore, it always works. Whether or not it takes care of a problem I've had for 40 years, I mean, shame on you. You should have been using this 40 years. I just wish that it would have existed back then. But we do the best we can with where we're at, and we move forward.
A couple of comments on that, Dr. Osler, is I love the term, you've educated us all so much. So I just want to acknowledge you and thank you for all you've done to educate everybody in this whole arena. I love the term you came up with. It's the Goldilocks effect or zone, that not too much, not too little. What you're describing is that Goldilocks effect. And, another sort of commentary on taking more antioxidants was just sort of a, 90s, early 2000s was when we really kind of started getting into antioxidants. And there's this whole concept of, okay, I'm going to take glutathione. I'm even take it IV. Well, again, what we were talking about earlier, these 2 and 3 and 4 atoms in size absorb directly, don't have to be metabolized. All of these antioxidants are not native to our body. The old analogy of blueberries are great for you, but we don't grow blueberries in our body. You have to metabolize those to be able to get them into the cell to do that effect. And oh my gosh, right from the get-go, the studies with this showed that this turns on the glutathione production and the superoxide dismutase and the catalase, the master antioxidants within our cell. It turns those on, the effect and the production of those up to like 500, 800%. So, highly superior for doing exactly what you're talking about.
And, just to add a little bit of a nuance to that is that what these molecules enable your cells to do through the signaling is to provide the amount of glutathione that's necessary for the conditions that exist in the cell right then and there. And you can't determine that. Maybe you go to your naturopath's office and they give you an infusion of glutathione. Well, maybe you didn't need that much glutathione, but you're going to get it anyway. And that's not a good idea because you can get too much of some of these antioxidants. So what's the best way to do it is to help the cell to produce the amount of glutathione that's necessary to turn on through epigenetic effects the pathways that need to be turned on right now for the metabolic needs of the cell. And that's all about cell signaling. That's all about improving cellular communication and cell signaling. And that's what these molecules are all about. So it just enables the cell to do a better job of what it already knows how to do. But maybe the language of the cell is garbled because they don't have enough of these molecules to spiff up that communication and improve that communication. But you're much better off to let the cell decide how to do this than you are to try to do it, to have the arrogance of thinking that you can do it better than the cell can do it if you just give it a chance.
The body's wisdom.
That's extremely, extremely important. And it came out of some of the recent studies that came out of Bath and Sydney universities was that when we didn't need it anymore, it returned to baseline. And that was my point earlier, is that if we're taking things exogenously, other than OC, if we're taking them, we're top loading, we're putting them on. Those effects don't go away until all of those metabolites are metabolized and are detoxed. I mean, that's what happens, right? But in this case, that doesn't happen. And so it's when we say this is bioidentical, that's what we mean.
Yeah, and that study showed that like you were alluding to, I think that study showed that the percentage improvement in glutathione production was greater in the compromised cells than it was in the healthy cells. And that's just what you want it to be, because those are the cells that need the most help.
Yep.
But the fact that you're getting a boost in the healthy cells as well, isn't that critical too?
Well,
It,
I'm
it is, yeah, but it's not as important as it is to help
correct.
the cells
So
that are
did you?
best.
We've only got this is the fastest hour in the SIA. I can't believe we only have 3 minutes. But Dr. Aaron, did you ever think you would see anything this big? And is there anything out there? Because yeah, I'm sure you have people approach you all the time. Have you seen anything that comes close to this?
Not even remotely. It's like a lot of people early on, particularly, I've been using it 12 years, and, you know, I used to talk to people in ASEA about what a gift this was, and everybody who was, even remotely successful in this as a business was talking about they felt like there was divine orchestration. This is
Yeah.
these graced products. I used to talk about even before that started happening. It's like, every once in a while they're coming along these things that just are profound, and this is one of those. 12 years later, it's like, oh my gosh, we keep discovering more. It's like, what a gift this is to everybody at every level from any standpoint, but particularly in healthcare. No, there's not anything that, I remember going to my first fly-in and going, where did they come up with ASEA? And I went, oh, it's panacea. It's from panacea because everything gets dealt with. You can't say treated, but it turns on everything. And that wasn't where the name came from. But to answer your question, it's like, I don't think we'll see anything more than, variations on this theme because this is as basic and foundational as it gets, and it just works.
And the gold being added made it even bigger, which will open up more doors for other people to be on the liquid. They may never have learned of our liquid molecules unless they start trying the gold, which gets pretty quick results. We've seen it on the thermographics.
And you three are
Best
part of
thing-
the board. And Dick, and you're part of that. You're the head of that thing. Is there more coming? Is this it? Are we done? Or is there more coming? Should people stick around with this company and this opportunity, which I wanted to talk about, but we ran out of time? Are we done yet?
No, we're not done. I would absolutely stick around. I think Redox Gold was the first targeted product, but I think we'd be crazy to think that there won't be others coming down the pike. I'm not sure when, and I'm not sure what they're going to be, but we've got plenty of targets. We have in that Torre lab study, we identified some other targets that we could certainly look to and research. But no, I think we're, what we've done so far may be just a drop in the bucket if we were to have the benefit of looking back 10 years from now and see where ASEA is then and what we're dealing with. So I agree with Aaron. There's nothing else like it out there that can have as profound a benefit on people's health.
I would say in terms, Jim, of stay tuned, that
Yeah.
nothing that we know of is like about to come out right now, but we've been privy to what research is going on. And I want to just sort of give a shout out to, oh my gosh, I think it was about 4 years ago. They opened the Vertis Norton Research Center, and Tyler talked about his dedication to continuing research. And then they hired Hunter Dean, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, and Andrea Borges, Dr. Borges. The things they are doing are like mind-boggling, and including coming up with this, and this has opened a whole new door to targeted redox products. So I would say, and we get to be part of the discussions about, well, what about this and what about that? I wouldn't say you ain't seen nothing yet because you've seen miracles, but yeah, there's a lot more coming.
Yeah, and I think the best thing about Redox Gold is that when somebody says, "You got to show me that this stuff works,"
Right.
can now show people in a matter of minutes to hours that it works. If they've got something that hurts, the chances are really good that Redox Gold will significantly improve that, in a short period of time. They don't have to wait 90 days to have this awareness that their totality of health has improved.
I wish we hadn't run out of time because I have a bunch of videos, but one particular with a woman that's on this call tonight. The first 3 people we rubbed the Redox Gold on had amazing relief of very, very significant discomfort. The first 3 people, like as it was being rubbed on. And I got, after videos of them, and their faces tell it. Their discomfort goes from like 7 and 8 down. By the time it's dry, a minute and a half or so, their discomfort is gone. Their motion.
So I tell you what, guys, we're going to have you back on. Someone made the comment. I love this group that we have here. But I just want you guys just to ponder this question. If this is real, then who deserves to hear about it?
Of course.
And if you have a business mind, if you're kind of going, man, I always have wanted to do something on my own. I want to have my own gig. I want to be able to do my own stuff. There's nothing bigger than this. I'm an ex-stockbroker of 30 years, and I've seen a lot of IPOs, the initial public offerings, in my day. I'll guarantee you, you'll never see anything this big. And you can't own it, but you can distribute it. And you can use what's called leverage. Alan Noble did a phenomenal training this past Saturday talking about our business model. If you don't like network marketing, I hate to say it, but get over it. It is the best model on the planet to take this to the public and not have corporate America make all the money. We deserve to do it. We are a capitalist. And if you're not, well, go somewhere else. But you're here. People deserve to hear about it, guys. There's nothing bigger or better than what we've got. So, guys, I want to thank you for your time. And all the animals that are listening, please invite your humans back. Next week, next Thursday, we've got Dr. Marty Morin. There we go. Do that some more. Go ahead. Do it all, Aaron. And we got Beth Wolford on next Thursday. So come back and see us. What are you doing thumbs down for? Oh, it's raining. Oh, my gosh. So, guys, thank you. Dick Walker, thanks for subbing in for Dr. Maureen. Aaron, you're awesome. Lee Osler, thank you so much, my beautiful wife. And thank you. God bless. And we'll see you back here next Thursday.
Have a great week.
The video will be up this evening at redoxmatters.com shortly. God bless.
Great.
Guys, great night, great morning,
Thank you,
wherever
Aaron.
you are in the world.
Thanks.
Amen. Bye-bye.